we're going to take on the term mind reading. But before we get to that, I'm always going to ask you, please join our YouTube community. Please hit subscribe, and you can subscribe to this channel or hit the bell and you'll get notifications as we post future content down the line. So let's talk about this concept of mind reading. This episode may end up taking a very different path than you might think. There's actually a lot of stuff out there about how narcissists think they can read your mind. They actually arrogantly get a lot of swagger from the idea that they are able to read other people's minds and read other people like a book and get what they want out of them, and that they can do, they're almost like magicians. They can manipulate them and they can exploit their weaknesses. And frankly, sadly, this is true to a point. Some are really good at this, particularly the malignant narcissists who have that exploitative core that allows them to mine a person's weaknesses and use them for their own personal benefit. And no, narcissists are actually not really good at reading your mind per se. They're really good at being a salesperson, at listening to you long enough to learn your vulnerabilities and maybe even some of your preferences, and then store them away for a rainy day and pull this knowledge out in a way to put them at an advantage. Definitely not from a place of empathy. But that's not what this video about mind reading is about. I am talking about mind reading in another direction. In this episode, we are going to take on the idea that narcissists expect you to read their minds. Many times, a relationship with a narcissist can just feel like one big, fat misunderstanding. And the core of that misunderstanding is often the narcissist's core belief that other people should be able to read their minds. It's their grandiosity and egocentricity at play. Their grandiosity borders on the delusional. So they actually do believe that people should anticipate their needs and know what they want and make it all happen. And their egocentricity means that the narcissists actually do believe they should be the center of other people's lives too. This anticipation or sense that you are supposed to be reading the narcissist's mind can play out in several different ways. To start, it can actually be very simple. For example, you're supposed to know that they are hungry and what they want to eat, and prepare that kind of food for them and present it at the appointed time. Another form of mind reading can be very intention focused, and this is where it starts getting really toxic. Let's think of the classical narcissistic trope, and this is one that often plays out in couples therapy as well. For example, you may, in good faith, go into couples therapy and indicate that your partner said something menacing or cruel or invalidating, and share that thing that was said. The narcissist will then say something like, "You know I didn't mean that," gaslighting, or "What I really meant was blah, blah, blah," or "Please, you didn't really take that seriously, did you? You know I was still angry about last week. You know what that was about. It was about this other thing." It's frustrating as can be because no, you didn't know. And if there's one thing to know about all human relationships, is that there is a real danger in assuming anything, especially assuming a person's intentions. And the fact is, the reason so many people do get stuck in narcissistic relationships is that they are constantly issuing rationalizations for the narcissist's behavior. He didn't really mean that, or he just says angry things when he's upset, etc., etc. That may not be mind reading per se, but you can see how making assumptions about the narcissist's intent or reasons for their unhealthy behavior can be very tricky. And when you throw mind reading on top of all of it, it feels impossible. Narcissists are actually rather fragile. Obviously, we know that through their hypersensitivity and their insecurity, that often manifests in those ways. But we often forget it because they are so superior and so arrogant. And this can raise an issue of mind reading that can often play out with covert narcissists. Because covert narcissists are actually quite socially anxious, they do not do well in social situations. As a result, they may often really struggle in social situations, and then this can manifest them as being sullen and difficult and argumentative when you're in those situations. Afterwards, you may, in a moment of clarity, recognize that they needed reassurance and support to help them with their social anxiety. Again, that darned mind reading. But they would never ask for it because it would render them too vulnerable. I have spoken with many people who tell me that their inability to mind read leaves them feeling guilty because they feel as though they should have been able to sort of read their partner's mind or mental state. And because narcissists believe, yes, you should be able to read my mind because aren't I the center of everyone's universe? Then that whole set of assumptions can just drop more fuel on the fire. Mind reading can also be anticipatory. Remember, much as narcissists may really just be swaggering fools, they don't like to be seen as the bad guy. So they will sometimes go along on things that they don't want to do. For example, they may say, sure, we can have your family over for dinner, but no, they didn't really want your family over for dinner. If you went solely on the narcissist's words, the sounds coming out of his or her mouth said, yes, I want your family to come over for dinner. What should we have? But that's not what they meant. And the dinner ends up being a fraught, tense mess. And your family really doesn't want to do it again, and neither do you. After dinner, the narcissist may even complain about it and whines about how it felt on a bad night and that your narcissist just went along with it to make you happy. You have to love them pulling that manipulative guilt punch at the end. Then it's not unusual for them to go on to say, you should know that I just say yes to having your family come over because I don't want to listen to you complain about it later. And now you're in a double bind, a situation where you cannot win. You were expected to mind read and know that the narcissist never wanted them to come in the first place, and that now there will be a mess to clean up afterwards. In a narcissistic relationship, as this happens more and more over time, you can see how this can result in isolation and alienation, and that over time, you may just stop inviting people over, stop suggesting things to do, stop even attempting vacations or other special experiences, because even if the narcissist gives in and goes along with it, you run the risk of them obviously not really wanting to do it, and then you have to deal with their criticism, their contempt, their anger, and their bad behavior both during and after. And before you know it, your world becomes very narrow because you stop asking to do these things. And it's not because you are reading their mind. It's actually because you're trying to avoid the awful consequences because you can't read their mind. Now it's interesting because this issue of mind reading and the fallout from it is why couples therapy so often fails with narcissists. Now think about it. Traditional couples therapy focuses on communication and communicating in a healthy manner needs, wants, feelings, again, clearly, and taking ownership. So a couples therapist may send an unfortunate individual, basically when you go into couples therapy with a narcissist, you're sending that person into the lion's den because the therapist has told them to communicate. And so you do. You communicate. You communicate clearly about having friends over, or finally taking that trip to Italy, or hosting your sister's wedding. You give the narcissist the opportunity to share his or her concern, and then, boom, the whole thing blows up. You go back into therapy to talk about this, and you'd say, I did all the things you suggested, and then the therapist will say, no, keep trying. And so it's like the therapist is saying, you lost your right arm by sticking it into the lion's cage? No worries. Next time, just stick your left arm in. Communication like this does not work with narcissists because no, you can't read their mind. And even if you could read their mind, would you really want to have a relationship that's based on you channeling the narcissist's thoughts for them and responding in a way that works only for them? That's not a relationship, that's subjugation. Now, mind reading is a very problematic issue in narcissistic family structures. For example, narcissistic and invalidating family members who get angry when family members can't just anticipate what they want and just do it. Or children who grow up in homes in which anticipation of mind reading or their capacity to mind read is a prevalent theme. These kids live on eggshells. They become exhausted at waiting for that other shoe to fall and always over anticipating the narcissistic parent's needs or trying to decode all of these situations, trying to read the narcissistic parent's expressions, anything to stay ahead of the need to mind read and avoid a blow up. Where mind reading makes all of these relationships so tense is that if you don't do it right, and you're not always going to do it right, it's going to be followed by rage. In some ways, mind reading and your inability to do it can explain a fair share of narcissistic rage. At times, they're getting enraged because you didn't read their mind. You didn't know that they had a bad day at work, or you didn't know that someone had hurt their feelings, or you didn't know that things were not going the way that they want. They just get more and more sullen and petulant and angry, and it builds up like a volcano. And you aren't the only guilty party. Obviously, nobody can ever read another person's mind 100% of the time. Let me tell you a story, because I'm brought to mind a dynamic I once witnessed of a deeply narcissistic boss and his assistant, who really was literally like a sycophant. I mean, he just followed him around, and he was devoted to this narcissistic boss to a fault. The narcissistic boss, interestingly, way overpaid this assistant for his work. And the assistant worked 7 days a week and was available to the boss man 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the boss man would regularly, without asking, disrupt his holidays, without even wishing him a happy holiday, his wedding day even, you name it. It honestly looked like, in a way, the assistant was just like chained to this narcissistic boss. But there was more than a little cognitive dissonance there, because the assistant was so overpaid, and because he lived so well because of his high salary, he knew that his skill set would not translate to anybody else in the world paying him even a fraction of what he made. Now, I happen to have proximity to the players in all of this, so I was actually able to watch it over a long period of time. It was actually amazing how often this assistant did successfully mind read the narcissistic boss correctly. Honestly, it felt like 75 to 80% of the time, which is really quite startling. The assistant, and if we were to almost take a page out of the movie, A Devil Wears Prada, he would have the boss man's coffee in place, the lunch ordered, the items would be lined up on his desk. He would anticipate if it was a salad day or a soup day or a sandwich day. And if the good news, whether he had to share the good news first or whether he had to share the bad news first, like this poor assistant was on it. But if this assistant got it right 75% of the time, that meant he got it wrong 25%. And heaven help you if you were around during the 25%. The narcissistic boss would literally say out loud, "How could you not know that was what I wanted?" Curse word, curse word, curse word. "Why didn't you figure out what I needed?" Curse word, curse word. And would then scream and rage and yell about how everyone was against him. And it's amazing that he, the narcissist, was so successful, because even though he was surrounded by such garbage people. And the poor sniveling assistant, who was the narcissist's primary enabler, would snivel more and try to get it more right. And then the narcissist would come down from his cruel, abusive tantrum, and not surprisingly, it would happen again in a few days. It was just awful to witness this dynamic, but it was stunning to me how much the narcissist genuinely expected this assistant to actually read his mind. And then it was actually stunning and terrifying, the amount of rage that would follow when his mind wasn't read. If you pointed this pattern out to the narcissist, by the way, he'd blow up at you too. Your inability to not be able to mind read the narcissist is not only one of the primary drivers of conflict in a narcissistic relationship, but also a primary source of tension. One day you do realize that they actually do expect you to read their minds, and that you will pay dearly if you cannot do so. Now listen, there is a beautiful, almost childlike hope we have that someone actually could read our minds. It feels magical, and it feels special, and to be heard the way, honestly, a child wants to be seen and heard. It can almost feel like the culmination of magical thinking. And in every relationship, it may happen from time to time for no other reason than coincidence. Someone just almost literally reads your mind like, "I wanted Chinese food too," kind of thing. But while narcissists are guilty of expecting mind reading from an antagonistic and entitled and grandiose place, catch yourself and ensure that you also may not be expecting it too, maybe from the most innocent space. Mind reading is simply not possible in a relationship, and it can actually be dangerous to do so. If you do not feel heard, make that known. But obviously, if you're in a narcissistic relationship, sharing the idea that you don't feel heard is not going to matter. Listen, if I could read minds, I would be a very wealthy woman. And I think we'd all be wiser. And the fact is, if we could read minds, we'd also get our feelings hurt a lot more often, because we know what people were thinking of us. But we can't read minds, thank goodness. And you might find that when narcissists expect you do, that it takes an already confusing relationship and makes it even more confusing. Leave the mind reading to the crystal balls and purveyors of psychic magic. And if someone expects it of you, please see it as the red flag it is. A lot of people use mind reading as this space to try to create some control in the relationship. This is what they want. I know this is what they want. And if we could just do it this way, everything will be fine. And it's, again, that eggshelly tension that builds up in you because you try to read their mind. Let's try to guess what kind of mood they're going to come home in. We don't usually do this with healthy people. It's a unique element of the narcissistic relationship that you feel compelled to mind read. You believe if you could mind read, things would go better. And in a sick twist, the narcissists expect you to mind read for them, whether it's what they want for lunch or why they say and why they do what they do. None of it's possible. And one more example of why these relationships really are impossible. Thanks again for tuning in. I hope this video explains sort of the high points and the low points of mind reading as a term. And as always, please consider subscribing to this channel. Hit that button that says subscribe, and then you will be part of this family. You'll be able to access all of our content. And also, if you hit that bell, you'll get notifications about new episodes as we put them out. Thanks again.